Lionel Richie was standing at the stage door. 20,000 people were waiting. The lights were ready. The band was ready. A security guard handed him an envelope. Inside was a letter, old, worn at the edges, written by a man whose name wasn't there. Lionel read it, and when he walked out onto that stage, something was different about the way he sang. There is a specific quality to the 30 minutes before a major concert that most people never see, and that performers rarely describe with complete accuracy, because the complete accuracy of it would require admitting to a vulnerability that the mythology of performance is not supposed to contain. The mythology says that performers are ready, that they have rehearsed and prepared and run through every element of what is about to happen until the anxiety has been converted into something usable, something that can be channeled through the music rather than expressed before it. The mythology says that when the artist stands at the stage door and hears the crowd beyond it, they feel excitement rather than fear, or that the fear has been transformed into something indistinguishable from excitement, which amounts to the same thing. Lionel Richie had been performing for more than 30 years by the time the evening in question arrived. He had stood at stage doors on every continent, in arenas and stadiums and festival grounds and concert halls, and had walked through each of them into the specific space of a live performance with the accumulated professional competence of someone who has done this enough times to know that the thing waiting on the other side of the door is manageable. He had performed for 2.6 billion people at the Olympic closing ceremony. He had performed at the Grammy Awards and the American Music Awards and every significant platform that popular music provides. He had stood at stage doors in conditions of extreme pressure and extreme expectation and had walked through them and delivered what was required, because delivering what was required was what he did. And yet the 30 minutes before the show had never fully lost the quality of something he needed to move through rather than something he could simply inhabit. He had his rituals, the specific sequence of things he did in the time before the performance to organize himself for what was coming, to make the transition from the person he was when no one was watching to the person he became when 20,000 people were watching and the music started, and the two versions of himself collapsed into a single thing that was more completely present than either version alone. The rituals were not superstitious exactly, but they were reliable. The specific comfort of doing the same things in the same order, the way that reliable sequences provide the nervous system with evidence that the situation is under control.
He was moving through them when the security guard appeared. The man was young, one of the team assigned to the backstage area for the evening, responsible for the specific geography between the public world of the audience and the private world where the performer existed in the final minutes before the boundary between those worlds dissolved. He was carrying a plain white envelope. He held it out to Lionel with the slightly uncertain expression of someone who has been asked to do something outside the normal parameters of his job and is not entirely sure whether the delivery will be welcomed. "A man in the audience asked me to give you this," he said, "before the show. He said it was important." Lionel took the envelope. In 30 years of performing, people had handed him things before shows, set lists, notes from the production team, occasionally flowers or cards from fans who had found ways to pass things through the various layers of the backstage infrastructure. He was not surprised by the envelope. He was curious about it in the mild, distracted way of someone whose attention is primarily directed elsewhere, toward the 20,000 people on the other side of the stage door and the 2 hours that were about to begin. He opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded in thirds in the way that letters are folded when they are put into envelopes. Not a note card or a printed message, but a full page of handwriting, the kind of handwriting that belongs to an older person, deliberate and slightly uneven, the product of a hand that had written a great many things over a long life and had not lost the habit of care, even as the physical act had become slightly harder. The paper itself was not new. It had the quality of something that had been carried for a while. Not damaged, not dirty, but worn in the specific way of things that have been handled repeatedly, that have been taken out and looked at and folded and put back many times before the decision was made to send them somewhere. There was no name at the bottom. The letter began simply with the directness of someone who has decided that the time available does not permit anything other than the essential thing. It said, "My wife died in 1987. That night I heard 'Hello' on the radio. I had not cried since she died. I did not know how to begin crying or where the crying would take me if I started, and so I had not started. But when I heard 'Hello,' I cried. And when I stopped crying, I felt, for the first time since she had been gone, that I could continue. Not that things would be good or that the loss would become smaller, only that I could continue." Lionel stood at the stage door and read this. The 30 minutes before the show had contracted to something smaller and more specific, not the general anxiety of performance, but the particular attention of someone who has received something that requires it. He read the first paragraph again. He read the second.
The letter continued. It said, "I have never written to you before. I do not write letters generally. I am not someone who does things like this. But tonight, I am in the audience with my granddaughter. She is 7 years old. She has never been to a concert. I have been telling her about music her whole life, about the songs that matter and why they matter, and what it means to hear something that reaches you in a place that you didn't know was reachable. Tonight, I am going to dance with her. I wanted you to know that this is happening. I wanted you to know that the song you wrote in a room somewhere, that you thought about and worked on and put out into the world without knowing where it would go, it went here. It went to a man who needed it on the worst night of his life, and now he is going to dance with his granddaughter because of it. I thought you should know." Lionel had been asked, in hundreds of interviews across 30 years of professional life, about the experience of writing songs and releasing them and not knowing where they went, about the specific uncertainty of making something personal and sending it out into the world without any reliable mechanism for understanding what it did when it got there. He had given various answers to this question, all of them true in their way, about the faith required to make something without knowing its destination, about the gratitude he felt when someone told him that a song had mattered to them, about the particular humility of understanding that the songs he had made had lives of their own that were entirely independent of anything he did after releasing them. But he had never stood at a stage door 30 minutes before a show, holding a piece of paper that told him in the specific, unornamented language of an old man writing without his name exactly where one of his songs had gone and what it had done when it got there. He had known in the abstract. He had been told in the abstract, in the general terms of fan appreciation and industry metrics and the various numbers that measure the reach of a popular song. He had never been told like this, in the particular, in the specific, in the language of a man who had not cried since his wife died and had cried when he heard "Hello" on the radio and had decided in the aftermath of the crying that he could continue. He folded the letter carefully and put it in the inside pocket of his jacket, close to wherever the inside pocket of a jacket is closest to, which is, if you think about it, fairly close to the heart, which is not a coincidence in the way that most things are not coincidences when you look at them carefully enough. He stood at the stage door for another moment. The noise of 20,000 people filtered through it, the specific sound of a large audience before a show begins, the accumulated energy of people who have come from wherever they have come from and are now in the same place together, waiting for the thing they came to receive. He thought about the man in the audience. He did not know what the man looked like,
did not know his name, did not know where he was sitting among the 20,000, but he knew that somewhere in that building was a man who had been carrying a piece of paper that he had probably written several times before he was satisfied with it, who had given it to someone and asked them to deliver it before the show, who was now sitting somewhere in the dark with a 7-year-old girl and waiting for the music to start so they could dance. He knew this in the specific way that knowledge becomes real when it has a face, or in this case, a handwriting, which is its own kind of face, its own kind of identity, the mark of a person on a page. The stage manager appeared at his shoulder with the particular expression of someone who needs to say something that the situation requires without interrupting whatever is happening. It was time. The lights were going down on the audience side. The band was in position. 20,000 people were about to stop being a crowd and become an audience, which is a different thing. A crowd is people in the same place, but an audience is people in the same place listening together. And the distinction is everything. Lionel Richie walked through the stage door. The noise that met him when he appeared was the specific noise of 20,000 people recognizing the person they came to see. Not just the sound of applause, but the sound of arrival, of something expected and hoped for finally becoming real. He stood at the microphone. He looked out at the dark space in front of him, the faces he could and couldn't see, the general mass of people who had their own reasons for being there, their own histories with the songs they were about to hear, their own versions of the thing the old man had put in his letter, the specific, private experience of music reaching them in a place they had not known was reachable. He thought, somewhere in there a man is about to dance with his granddaughter. And then he sang. He sang the way people sing when they have been reminded, in the most specific possible terms, of why the singing matters, not for the awards or the chart positions or the industry metrics, but for this, for the man who cried when he heard hello on the worst night of his life and decided he could continue. For the 7-year-old girl who had been told about music her whole life and was about to find out what it felt like to be inside it. For all the people in the dark who had come with their own letters, unwritten, undelivered, carried in the places closest to wherever they kept the things that mattered most.
He had been performing for 30 years. He had delivered many performances that the people who witnessed them described afterward as something they would not forget. But the people who were in the arena that night said, in the conversations that happen after significant concerts, when the crowd has dispersed into the ordinary world and people are still processing what they received, that something had been different about that particular evening. That Lionel Richie had sung like a man who had just been reminded of something essential. That the music had reached them in a way that music sometimes reaches people, past the ordinary defenses, into the specific place that the old man had described in his letter, the place that the letter and the songs and the dancing and all the rest of it were always trying to get to. Lionel Richie has said many times, in many different ways, that he does not always know where the songs go when he sends them out into the world. He has said that the not knowing is part of what it means to make music, that you create something and release it and trust that it will find the people who need it, in the way that certain things find the people who need them when the conditions are right. What he has said less often is that sometimes the songs come back, that sometimes, not always, not even often, but sometimes the place the song went sends word, that a man folds a piece of paper and carries it for a while and eventually gives it to a stranger to deliver, and the stranger delivers it 30 minutes before a show, and the performer stands at the stage door and reads it and puts it in his inside pocket and walks out into the light. Somewhere in the arena that night, an old man danced with his granddaughter. Lionel Richie does not know his name. He does not know which song they danced to, or whether it was Hello, or All Night Long, or 3 Times Lady, or something else entirely. He knows only what the letter told him, that the song reached the man on the worst night of his life, and that the man continued, and that the continuation eventually produced the dancing. That is where the songs go. That is what they do when they get there. And on the night that a plain white envelope arrived at a stage door 30 minutes before showtime, Lionel Richie stood in the wings with 20,000 people waiting and understood it. Not in the abstract, not in the general terms of a career built on reaching people, but completely in the specific, particular, unrepeatable way that a handwritten letter from an old man with no name at the bottom can make something completely understood. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit the like button. Share this with someone who has ever been reached by a song at exactly the right moment. Because somewhere, a songwriter sent something into the world without knowing where it was going, and it went to you. Leave a comment below. Which Lionel Richie song has reached you in a place you didn't know was reachable? And don't forget to ring the notification bell for more stories about the music behind the music, the letters and the stage doors, and the old men who dance with their granddaughters because of a song someone wrote in a room somewhere and sent out into the world.